Anakin Skywalker undoubtedly had the highest potential out of any Jedi or Sith to ever exist, but we all know that he fell completely short of this potential, and we all know why. But today I want to talk about which version of Anakin Skywalker would have been his most powerful version ever, and how Anakin could have literally become a god made of the Force if he had just changed one thing. To start things off with, a lot of people will say that the obvious choice for Anakin's most powerful version would have been if he defeated Obi-Wan on Mustafar and trained with Sidious as a Sith Lord with all of his limbs intact. George Lucas himself stated that this version of Anakin would have had twice the potential of Emperor Palpatine himself, with Palpatine even agreeing in-universe, as he outright tells Yoda that Vader would become more powerful than either of them, with Sidious in his own right being the greatest and most powerful Sith Lord to ever exist. That is, if you don't believe that Darth Plagueis or Darth Vitiate might have rivaled even him in terms of power. And while yes, if Anakin had defeated Obi-Wan on Mustafar, he would have certainly become a very powerful Sith Lord in his own right, allowing Anakin to surpass pretty much any Jedi or Sith in galactic history, excluding hacks that might have been able to trump Anakin's raw potential like Mace Windu's Vapod. This actually wouldn't have been the most powerful version that Anakin could have possibly become, not even by a long shot. One could also say that Anakin being born into the hands of the Sith or the Jedi, being trained from birth, and never losing any of his limbs would be his most powerful version. But again, while this would make for a pretty overpowered version of Anakin Skywalker, it would still be nowhere near the scenario that I think would make him his absolute strongest. And there is still one open option that many people completely overlook in terms of what will be Anakin's absolute peak in terms of reaching his full potential or even going further beyond it. And the answer, put simply, is that Anakin would have become his most powerful version that he could have possibly ever been if he chose to replace the father on Mortis. If you think about it, Anakin Skywalker is a being born of the Force who is quite literally the chosen one stated to bring balance to the Force itself. And while it's questionable on whether destroying all the Jedi and the Sith was necessary or not, or if just destroying the Sith was enough to bring that balance, either way, Anakin eventually achieves this mission after he finally turns on his former master Darth Sidious on the second Death Star, redeeming himself as Anakin Skywalker and finally balancing out the Force for the light side and the dark side. But on Mortis, people really don't realize how absolutely amped Anakin's powers were in the Force during that time. Let's talk about the father, the son, and the daughter. And then we can move into why Anakin on Mortis was so impressive and where his powers would have been had he stayed on Mortis himself, starting with the actual Mortis gods. These are beings that represent the pure embodiment of each sector of the Force, with the son being the pure embodiment of the dark side, the daughter being the pure embodiment of the light side of the Force, and the father being the balance in between. And the powers that these beings possessed in the Force was nothing short of absolutely broken, even for the feats that we see some of the Jedi and Sith use later in Star Wars Legends. For one, it seems as though every Mortis god possesses the ability to levitate or fly, but also they can transform their bodies, taking the shape of giant winged creatures. But I do believe that if they ever had a reason to do so, they could also take the shape of other people familiar to the person they are targeting. We also know from the father that they are powerful enough to hold lightsabers in their bare palms with minimal effort, and they can also possess other mortal beings whom they come in contact with. And they can also read minds, as the son does to pry into Ahsoka's mind and find the best way to corrupt even a Jedi as pure as herself. But they can also see into the future and have such a mastery over this ability that they can also grant the ability for others to see into their own future as clearly as they can. We can also probably assume that they have access to every other known Force ability to the highest degree possible, as we see from the son having his own version of Red Force Lightning, presumably its most powerful variant due to the sun again embodying the dark side itself. Another important thing to mention for later in the video is that the father was more powerful than even Abeloth and had actually defeated her some point in the Star Wars timeline. And Abeloth herself was so powerful that even Grandmaster Luke, with feats like bringing down several Star Destroyers at once, becoming one with the Force against the Yuzong Vong, and leveling out entire armies of Force-resistant fighters with one Force push, and also wielding his lightsaber so fast that it seemed like he had several arms at once, still debatably couldn't even beat Abeloth against her will, meaning that the father was stronger than Luke and Abeloth, who were both far beyond any Jedi or Sith during the Clone Wars era. Now, how does this relate to Anakin Skywalker, and why does Anakin replacing the father make Anakin his strongest version possible? Well, first, we saw how Anakin was able to tame the son and the daughter, a feat that we know is only possible by the father, although his ability to do so were becoming more and more diminished with his passing age and his dwindling life force, with the son and the daughter arguably being more powerful than Abeloth herself, meaning Anakin being on Mortis and surrounded by the embodiments of the Force which he was born from, gave him a level of control and command over the Force that would have put Anakin above the son, the daughter, Abeloth, and Grandmaster Luke Skywalker. And again, Luke Skywalker as a Grandmaster is pretty much Anakin if he remained a Jedi and reached his full potential in the light side of the Force. And if you think that mid-Clone Wars Anakin Skywalker can even hold a candle to Grandmaster Luke in terms of power and Force abilities, you are sorely mistaken. And perhaps I can do a full video on Luke's peak display of power in the future if you guys are interested. But even more interesting, in the Star Wars The Clone Wars Infinity Magazine issue 7, there is actually a what-if scenario written by George Lucas himself about what would have happened if Anakin escaped the planet Mortis with the sun that'll help us get some understanding of how powerful Anakin would be here, in which Anakin and the son storm the Jedi Temple and pull up to the Jedi Council single-handedly, where Anakin beats all of the Jedi Masters at the same time on his own, as Anakin also easily cuts down Mace Windu with one move, and when Yoda tries to intervene, Anakin merely suspends Yoda in the air with the Force and cuts him down as if he's any regular old Jedi, and with sheer force, Anakin would enslave the entire galaxy, including Palpatine himself, as even Darth Sidious realized that while Anakin was being amped by the presence of the sun, he stood absolutely no chance in a direct confrontation. So Anakin, with the sun's powers alone, is enough to defeat the entire Jedi Council and maybe even Darth Sidious at the same time. And if he would have taken the father's place, who is more powerful than the son as an individual and stands as the holder to bring balance to the Force, he would have been much greater than he was in terms of the powers that he displayed even in George Lucas's What If. And as well, all the powers that the Mortis gods possess would have likely fallen into the grasp of Anakin as well, and Anakin would have become an immortal, all-knowing, and all-powerful Force being, which is something that not even Anakin with the training of Darth Sidious and not losing his limbs on Mustafar would have been able to achieve himself. But what do you guys think? Do you agree with that scenario that this would be the strongest version of Anakin Skywalker possible? And if not, what other possible scenarios can make Anakin even stronger? Be sure to leave your comments down below and also leave suggestions on which videos you'd like to see next, and I'm thinking about doing some what ifs, so also leave some ideas there as well. I hope you guys all enjoyed this video, and until next time, I'll see you then.